Welcome to another wonderful Susannah Calloway audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean Western romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Susannah Calloway, Western romance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. Coloradofrontier Bride. Chapter 1. Elizabeth Trent took a deep breath and pressed her shaking hands to her sides, trying to control her nerves. Deep inside, her stomach was churning. At least, she consoled herself, she was no longer crying. She felt as though she had rid herself of all the tears she possessed over the last few weeks, first with tears of joy on her mother's behalf, and then with tears of distress and sorrow. And now, she did not know what might come next. Steeling herself, squaring her shoulders, she knocked on the door to her stepfather's study. A long pause stretched out, pulling even harder at her nerves, before his deep voice came at last. "Enter." He must have known it was her, of course. The servants didn't dare knock during the day. Thomas Davis was a very important man and could not be disturbed by anything less than the house afire. Even her own mother, her poor mother. Her mother, who that very morning hadn't been able to meet Eliza's gaze as she whispered that Thomas insisted she keep their appointment to discuss the future. The future. With difficulty, Eliza kept a sardonic twist from her lips at the thought. The future as envisioned by Thomas Davis was very different from the future that Eliza had always pictured for herself and her mother. It even differed drastically from the future she had begun to imagine 2 months before, on the eve of her mother's engagement to the wealthy businessman. And now, every detail of that dream life had fallen apart. It only remained to find out what was left in the shambles. Thomas Davis was a startlingly handsome man. His good looks were especially startling considering that he was a successful businessman, and even more so with the knowledge that he had been a bachelor for 8 years before turning his attention to Hannah Trent. Hannah had been quite young when she gave birth to Eliza and had lost her first husband, Eliza's father, soon after. Now 37, it was remarkable to look at her with the knowledge of the pain she had endured throughout her life, for not a bit of it showed on her fair skin, in her clear eyes, in the rosebud smile of her lips. Hannah Trent had never allowed even a hint of her distress and worry to be on display, not even to her daughter and closest companion. It was shocking to the core to see how much she had changed, even within the few weeks since she had become Hannah Davis. What sort of man could take a fine, strong, friendly, beautiful woman like Eliza's mother and twist her into a quiet, reclusive, frightened female who suddenly looked more than her age, and accomplish it in such a short time? Even worse was the day that Thomas Davis had called Eliza to his study to tell her that she must go. The very day that he and his new wife had returned from their brief honeymoon. Hannah had been present that day, standing beside him at the desk. At that time, she had still ventured a protest when Davis voiced his ultimatum. "Oh, but Thomas, surely, there is plenty of room for all of us here, isn't there?" Davis had turned on her with a frown, and immediately Hannah had shrunk back, growing quiet. It had struck Eliza to the core to see her mother cowed into silence with nothing more than a look. Hannah had not put forth any more protests. And today, she was not even present. Eliza's heart was pounding as she came to stand before Thomas Davis. The man was a good bit older than her mother, approaching 60, still, for all that, he was still strikingly handsome, with rather hard good looks. His hair had gone silver but was still thick and springy. She had an excellent view of it now, as his head was still bowed over the papers on his desk, and he had not bothered to look up as she entered. What was it that had caused Thomas Davis to settle on Hannah Trent, a widow of middle age and little fortune, with a grown daughter of her own, for his second wife, after 8 long years of bachelorhood? How terrible it was that she had acquiesced. Worse still was the knowledge that Eliza was certain of, that her mother had blessed and thanked a benevolent creator for providing her with a handsome, wealthy husband, but that it was nothing less than love that had caused her to accept Davis's offer of marriage. Any other woman would have jumped at the chance to be courted by him, simply to see what they could gain from his attentions. But Hannah, oh, Hannah was in love. And perhaps it was that fact alone, Eliza thought, that kept Davis's interest. At long last, Davis lifted his head. His eyes were cold and gray, nearly the same silver shade as his hair. He gazed at her with an impersonal attention that always struck her as almost more objectionable than dislike, or even hatred, as though she was hardly human, hardly worth his notice at all. And goodness, but her heart was pounding ever harder. She pressed her lips together firmly, determined not to let her intimidation show. Perhaps he would be gratified by it, but more likely he would not even care, and that would somehow be even worse. "Elizabeth," he said. "I've been expecting you for half an hour now. It would behoove you to attend appointments with greater punctuality." The feeling of being spoken to as though she was a child was not one that she was used to, at least, not until she came to live under his roof. Even when she was young, her mother had always spoken to her as an equal, treating her as quite grown up. Now that she was 18 and a grown woman, his tone chafed at her. But this was not the time to give in to her irritation. "I'm sorry, stepfather. I had hoped to receive a response from the typist's agency this morning, and delayed waiting for it." "And did you receive a response?" Biting her lip, she shook her head. He sighed slightly and folded his hands on the desk. "Have you received any responses at all, Elizabeth, to your requests for employment?" "No," she was forced to admit. "Where have you applied?" "The typist's pool, several shops, the Marlbrook Inn as a cleaner, and to 3 families here in Boston as a governess." It was almost worse to think of becoming a governess than it was to become a secretary or a cleaner at the inn. Her mother would never have allowed her daughter to apply for such lowly employment. Until, of course, she married Thomas Davis and gave him all the power in her life. "I see. And yet no one will have you. I fear, Elizabeth, that your mother has done you a great disservice in allowing you to grow up without any skills or knowledge." "It isn't my mother's fault," Eliza said hotly. "Then it must be yours," said Davis sharply. "The fault lies somewhere, does it not? If it is not with your mother, then it must be with you. If you had only tried harder, Elizabeth, and applied yourself, I dare say you could have found employment easily enough. You have a pretty face, if not so pleasing a manner, and for some people, that is enough." The implication being, of course, that it was not enough for him. But what was it that had attracted him to Hannah Trent in the first place, if not her pretty face? "As it is, I'm afraid that our arrangement must stand. You will leave the house immediately or allow me to dispose of your future as I will. And," he added sternly, "as is my right as your stepfather." Eliza took a breath. "If you are sure that I must leave. Do not question me, child." I didn't mean to." She tried to regain what little confidence she had left. "I only meant, your home is so spacious, surely even if you and my mother do have more children, there will be." "It is not the spaciousness of my home that is in question," he said sharply. She kept herself from shrinking back a step, but only just. He would not explain, she knew it by now. He would not say the words outright. But she knew his reasoning. He intended to have children by her mother, and these children would inherit his fortune upon his death, not Hannah, and certainly not any impecunious stepdaughter. The worry of her mother having children at her age was consuming enough. The knowledge that, should these future children take after their father and not their mother, Hannah could be out on her ear without a penny after her husband's death, was too much to take onto her shoulders. She had more immediate concerns. "I will leave, of course, if that is what you wish," she said. "Without employment? You'll be on the street within a day." "My inheritance, my father's money. It belongs to me now, of course," he said smoothly. "Your mother handed it over to me the day we said our vows. It will not be due to you until your 21st birthday, and I will abide strictly by the law and not hand it over until the moment it belongs to you. I hope you understand me, Elizabeth." She bit her lip. "I understand you very well," she said quietly. He intended to run her out, and not just out on the street. He didn't want her anywhere near her mother, or anywhere near the home that would someday be the inheritance of her half-brothers and sisters. No, if Thomas Davis had his way, Elizabeth Trent would be sent to the ends of the earth. "What is my future, then, stepfather?" With bated breath, she waited. He took his time, arranging the papers on his desk neatly as though they were all consuming in their interest. At last, he leaned forward, lacing his fingers together in front of him once more. "I have made arrangements with a certain matrimonial agency," he said. "They have located a husband for you, a fine match, perfectly respectable. He is a rancher, by name of Carter, Nathaniel Carter. By all accounts, a gentleman who will make a good husband, lacking only the opportunity of courting an unmarried woman, as is common in the reaches of the West." She caught her breath. The West? Yes. He consulted a paper. "Colorado, I believe. A small town on the western border of the state. But that's 2,000 miles away." Could she be imagining the faint smile that crossed his lips? A smile of contentment, of a plan coming together just as intended. Her heart twisted within her. 2,000 miles away from her mother, unable to keep an eye on her and help her out when needed, and suppose Thomas Davis got his way and Hannah became pregnant? Suppose her pregnancy was difficult, as pregnancies later in life so often were? The thought of her mother becoming gravely ill, perhaps even dying, simply due to Davis's whim made Eliza feel ill herself. Even worse to know that she could not be there at her side. But there was nothing else to be done. Her choice was clear: live on the street, eking out her existence as long as she could, or accept Davis's arrangement, his terms. In the papers at his hand, she suspected, was the letter of acceptance, ready to be sent, and, no doubt, a train ticket, already procured and prepared for her. All that remained would be to pack her bags and say her goodbyes. If, indeed, he allowed her to do either of those things. She met his cold, impersonal silver gaze. She was not the sort of girl to hate without cause, but she had never felt such strong revulsion for a human being in her life. All the worse that he was her stepfather, her mother's new husband, upon whom they both must depend for the needs of their lives. She swallowed hard. "I accept the match," she said quietly. Davis smiled. "Good," he said. "A wise choice, Elizabeth. And I hope you will see that I am only acting with your best interests, and the best interests of your mother, at heart. Doubtless you will be glad of the arrangement, once you arrive." Eliza did not think for a moment that she would ever be glad of anything that her stepfather did, now or in the future. For a moment, though, she allowed herself to cling on to an imagined hope. Perhaps she could go to this town, and marry this man, and perhaps he would be so good as to allow her to send for her mother afterwards. If he was indeed a rancher and respectable, hard-working, perhaps there would be enough money to provide for Hannah. But almost as soon as the thought crossed her mind, she knew that it would never be so, and her heart sank. Her mother loved Thomas Davis, and no one could pry her away from him, not unless she made the decision herself. She was allowing her only daughter to be sent 2,000 miles away to marry a stranger. What greater test of her love could there be? Chapter 2. Nathaniel Carter. B-K Ranch. Rocky Creek, Colorado. For the umpteenth time, Eliza read over the letter containing her destination. And for the umpteenth time, she set it down with a sigh and turned her attention to the window. Outside, the world was flying by at an unimaginable rate. She knew that she could never have hoped to run so fast, or so far. But from the vantage point of the train seat, it almost seemed as though she could imagine herself racing alongside it, leaping over creeks and hayricks and any other obstacle in her path, making her way steadily to the west. Never, she reminded herself, to return. A solid 4 days into the journey, and her heart was still aching, her thoughts returning to the farewell with her mother again and again. Her instincts had proved true. Thomas Davis had indeed already purchased her train ticket and had written up the letter of acceptance. And, too, he had insisted that she be ready to depart the very next morning. Perhaps it would have been easier to simply bundle herself up and leave at once. The final evening, seated across the table from her mother, had been spent in uncomfortable silence. Her mother's eyes were full of tears, and as painful as it was for Eliza to see the hurt that Hannah was bearing, it was consolation at the same time, and the only consolation that she could expect, she knew. The next morning, Davis had insisted on accompanying her to the railway station. To ensure that she boarded the train, she supposed, and had likewise insisted that his wife stay behind at home. "There's no call for displays of emotion in public," he dictated. "I have a reputation to uphold in our community, and I expect my wife and stepdaughter to do their best to support it." And so, hastily, while he looked on with folded arms, Eliza had said a hurried goodbye to her mother, too rushed to even be brought to tears. It was only afterwards, when the door to the house closed between them, that tears began to prick at her eyes, and it was only due to her sheer stubbornness, determined not to cry in front of Thomas Davis, that she was able to hold them at bay. Once she took her seat on the train, however, all constraints were removed, and she wept and wept for hours. Even now, 4 days later, she could feel the tears begin to surge again. Desperate for something to take her mind off her past troubles, and the equally troublesome future, she cast about herself for a distraction. She found it in the person of the young woman who sat across from her, deeply engrossed in a novel. "Hello," Eliza blurted out. The young woman looked up, blinking wide blue eyes in confusion. "Me?" she mouthed, putting a hand to her heart. Eliza nodded rapidly. "Yes, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you." Or rather, she couldn't help but chuckle nervously. "I suppose I do mean to interrupt you. But I'm terribly sorry about it, all the same. You look as though you are enjoying your book very much. May I ask what it is you're reading?" "Oh." Evidently disarmed by this, the young woman chuckled, too, though there was a hint of embarrassment about it. "I'm afraid it's silly of me, it's a children's book, really. 8 Cousins, it's new out, only just last year, and I admit outright that I stole it from my niece. It's terribly entertaining, for all that." She marked her place carefully and then offered it to Eliza, who reached over to accept it and perused it briefly. "Do you like to read, yourself?" "I do, though I wasn't able to bring any books with me, and I'm regretting it more and more as the journey goes on," Eliza confessed. "I've had only my thoughts to accompany me, and I'm afraid that they're not very good company at all." "Oh, dear," said the girl, her brow wrinkling with a faint frown. "I have so many questions. Why couldn't you bring any books? Where did you leave from? Why aren't your thoughts good company? And, finally, who is your favorite author?" After that, conversation suddenly became much easier. As the girls exchanged their stories, Eliza found that her new companion was Clara Simmons, only 2 years older than she was herself. She had been visiting family in Chicago. Her older sister Maud had 3 children and a newborn infant. "Each time that she's expecting, she begs my mother to let me come and stay with her," said the girl with a laugh. "She says she misses my company, but it's just that she wants another pair of hands around to help with the little ones. Not that I mind, they're adorable, they really are, though goodness they are a handful and a half. I'm not surprised that she asks me to come and stay, I'm only surprised that she doesn't beg the whole family to join her every few years for the same purpose." Besides her sister in Chicago, the oldest of the Simmons siblings, Clara also had 2 older brothers, Samuel and Henry, as well as her parents. "Henry's 30, she explained, and quite serious about life. He helps my father run their farm. Sam is only 24, the closest to me in age, and, I reckon, the closest in everything else, too. I suppose a sister oughtn't to choose her favorite among her siblings, just as parents shouldn't choose favorites among their children, but I can't help it. Henry is good and kind and strong, and Maud is motherly and devoted to her family, but Sam makes me laugh, and I prefer that to just about anything." Eliza smiled at this. "I can understand that right enough," she said. "It's precious, to have someone who can make you smile. I only wish that I'd had siblings myself. But my father died when I was young, only 3 years old, and mother decided not to remarry." She caught herself and swallowed hard. "Until just recently, that is." In response to Clara's intrigued questioning, Eliza let the whole story unspool: her mother's unexpected courtship by Thomas Davis, their quick marriage, and how drastically and suddenly everything had changed immediately afterwards. She was pleased to find that her heart was greatly unburdened simply by sharing the events of the last few months. Perhaps this was what she needed, not to have her mother hold her in her arms and tell her that everything was going to be all right, but simply to make a new friend. A good friend, with a bright, cheerful disposition and a willingness to listen with unmistakable sympathy. She found her spirits rising for the first time in several months, for the first time, truly, since the fateful night that Thomas Davis had first begun to pay her mother his attention. Clara heaved a romantic sigh. Your poor mother. She must have been terribly lonely all those years after your father passed away. Eliza opened her mouth to reply, and then paused, frowning a little. I suppose so. I never thought about it. But yes, perhaps she was. And if so, it's only natural that she should be swept off her feet by Mr. Davis, especially if he is as rich and handsome as you say. But I'm sure she must miss you greatly. Eliza felt a pang at her heart. I don't know, she said hollowly. On one hand, I hope that she does. I hope that she misses me as much as I miss her. On the other, I hope that she can find happiness in her new life, with her new husband, and whatever children may come along. She shook her head. Oh, I suppose I don't really know what I hope. I'm afraid I'm rather bitter about the whole thing. I would be, too, I imagine. That is, I imagine I would imagine it, though I can't quite imagine my father ever telling me that I must leave the house and marry a complete stranger thousands of miles away. Clara pondered this conundrum for a moment. Sometimes I could almost wish that he would. It's desperately difficult to find a good husband these days, especially in a town as small as Rocky Creek. Why, I grew up alongside all the young men, and they're practically like brothers to me, most of them. And yet, when you visited your sister, she did not attempt to match you to anyone in Chicago? Oh, goodness, no, Clara said promptly, shaking her head. She knows me too well for that. She knows I'd kick up my heels at the first sign of any man that I didn't choose for myself. She laughed. I'm quite notorious for my outspokenness, you see. I do see, Eliza said, smiling in amusement. I think I might have been the same, once upon a time, but everything has changed now. And, I suppose, as a married woman, I won't be able to speak my mind at all. Nonsense, said Clara, tossing her head. If a man won't let you speak your mind, he's no good as a husband anyhow. Tell me, won't you, who the matrimonial agency matched you with? And I'll tell you right here and now whether he's worth your time or not. Her vehemence made Eliza laugh outright. I'd be glad enough of your help, she said, for it isn't as though I have any insight into the man myself. The matrimonial agency was rather sparse with the details. All I know is that he is 26 years old, and runs a ranch in Rocky Creek, the B-Bar-K. Clara's eyes snapped to hers with a sudden surge of interest. The B-Bar-K? Yes, I believe so. And he runs it, not owns it? Eliza frowned faintly. I suppose I'm not sure what the distinction is, she said slowly. Well, Clara said, tapping her skirts with her fingers in some nervousness, the foreman of the B-Bar-K ranch is my brother, Sam. But the owner? Ah, it must be the owner, then. Then surely you mean Nat Carter, Nathaniel, that is. Eliza nodded, smiling. That's it exactly. Do you know him? Clara turned her head to the window for a long moment, hesitating to speak. Eliza felt her own anxiety rising within her. To her surprise, she found that the opinion of her new friend was just as valuable to her as it would have been had they known each other for decades. Once again, she found herself marveling at how remarkable it was that someone she had only just met could change her outlook so dramatically. At last, Clara looked back at her, and a smile curved her lips. Nat Carter, she said, is, indeed, worth your time. He is one of the most worthwhile men I can think of, in fact. My brother has worked for him for 4 years now, ever since he took over the ranch after his father died, and he has nothing but good things to say about him. He is strong, capable, hard-working, honest, kind, and I suppose some might call him handsome, to boot. In fact, I only wonder, she went on, as though ruminating to herself, why he should have had to write to a matrimonial agency for a bride. Any girl in the whole of Bullock County would have fallen all over themselves if he so much as looked at them twice. Perhaps that's just it, Eliza said thoughtfully. Perhaps it's just as it was with Mr. Davis and my mother, he was spoiled for choice, and so he chose to look elsewhere, for someone who was not keen on throwing herself at him. If Mr. Davis had not come to introduce himself to Mother at that supper party, she would have carried on with her life in perfect happiness, never knowing that he existed. Clara tilted her head, regarding Eliza for a long, quiet moment. "Perhaps," she said. "And perhaps your life, too, would have gone on in perfect happiness. But think of this, my dear, if so, you never would have met me." She broke off with a smile, and Eliza found herself chuckling once more. "You're right," she said, shaking her head. "What am I thinking?" "That's more like it," Clara said, nodding firmly. "Everything will turn out for the best, you'll see." She took a deep breath and reached over to pat Eliza's hand. "You'll see." Chapter 3. It was undoubtedly due to Clara's influence that Eliza spent the remainder of the journey reflecting on her hope, rather than mired in her sorrow. Her loneliness for her mother did not simply go away, of course. Even with the additional context of Hannah's likely loneliness prior to her marriage, Eliza couldn't help but regret the intrusion of Thomas Davis on their lives. She did not imagine that she would ever feel any differently, and neither did she imagine that Hannah would ever change her mind either. Still, with Clara's companionship and her cheerful chatter, Eliza found herself able to concentrate on the opportunities of the future rather than the iniquities of the past. Clara was full of stories of her girlhood in Rocky Creek. Growing up in the wilds of Colorado sounded like quite an adventure. Each story was full of scrapes and near misses, of getting lost and being found, of races to the top of the tallest tree and competitions to see who could tame a wild horse. None of us, it turned out, Clara confided with cheerful honesty. It sounded as though her comments about growing up alongside the boys of Rocky Creek, rendering their relationships like that of a brother and sister, were true with few exceptions. One of them, notably, was Nathaniel Carter. "Oh, he's 6 years older than I am," Clara explained with a wave of her hand when Eliza questioned his absence in her stories. "He was far beyond spending time out of doors with the children and climbing trees by the time I was old enough to leave my mother's side. His father took him to work alongside him at the ranch from the time he was 14 or so, and he was ever so serious about it. I remember the last day that he came to school, when I was only 8 years old. I believe half the girls in the entire school cried over the thought of not seeing him again the next morning." Eliza couldn't help the question. "Did you cry?" "Of course I did," Clara said. "But it was more because he always told off my brothers for pulling my hair than anything else. Nat was not my beau, Eliza, he was my protector. And I still firmly believe that that role is far more important for a young girl. I'd rather have a white knight than a suitor any day." She laughed as she said it, but Eliza suspected that there was more feeling beneath those words than her new friend was letting on. Clara changed the subject almost immediately, detailing the occasion when she and her brother Sam nearly drowned after trying to ice skate on a pond in late October. But the feeling stuck with Eliza. Clara certainly respected, almost revered, Nathaniel Carter. That boded well, Eliza decided. In the few days since she and Clara had met, she had come to value her opinion. The fact that she considered Nathaniel Carter a worthy husband meant that Eliza would likely take to him at once. And as the town of Rocky Creek grew closer with every passing mile, her nervousness was expanding into an all-encompassing force. No longer did she spend every moment missing her mother and mourning her prior existence. Now, she found herself daydreaming of the life ahead, a life spent married to a worthwhile man, with Clara as a close companion. Perhaps things wouldn't be so terrible after all. On the day that the train finally puffed to a stop in Rocky Creek, Eliza's heart was beating so swiftly that she was half afraid it would leap from her chest. She lifted down her valise from its place above her head and caught Clara's gaze. The other girl reached out to take her hand and give it a comforting squeeze. "Don't you worry," she said softly. "Everything's going to turn out for the best, you just wait and see." It was an oft-repeated refrain. For the first time, Eliza wondered whether Clara said it to convince others, or to convince herself. But that was simply her nerves speaking, she told herself firmly. The sooner she stepped off the train and met Nathaniel Carter, the sooner her nerves would be settled, and the sooner her new life could get started. The two friends were parted almost from the moment they set foot on the platform. There was quite a crowd for such a small town. Eliza had scarcely taken note of her surroundings as the train pulled slowly through the town, but it was not more than 5 blocks square, she was sure. She suddenly felt very far away from the city of her home. Why, the entirety of Rocky Creek could nearly have fit in her neighborhood of Boston alone. And yet, there were dozens of people on the platform. Fellow travelers disembarked, either to head off to their destinations or simply to stretch their legs in the 20-minute break before the train carried on westward. Friends and family met returning sojourners with glad cries. Chief among them was Clara's family. The middle-aged couple who descended on her with wide-open arms, Eliza surmised to be Mr. and Mrs. Simmons. In their wake came 2 young men. Both were tall, with broad shoulders and muscular forms that made clear they lived a working life. One of the 2 wore spectacles and a serious expression. He must be the elder, Eliza thought, Henry Simmons. The other, whose hair was several shades lighter, glanced in her direction and caught her gaze. He gave her a wide, friendly smile, and she felt something tight within her release its tension, just a little. Her nerves gave way, and she could suddenly breathe a little easier. She found herself smiling back. That one, she knew, must be Clara's favorite brother, Samuel. But her ready identification of Clara's family did not help her own predicament. Heart in her mouth, hope on her shoulders, she lifted herself to her tiptoes and searched the crowd for any man who might be Nathaniel Carter. The crowd parted, and there he stood. He wasn't far behind the Simmons, as it turned out. She had simply overlooked him because of the joyful crowd of Clara's family. He was several inches shorter than either of Clara's brothers and was easily hidden behind them. Still, she knew who he was as soon as she laid eyes on him, even though the matrimonial agency had not furnished her with many identifying details. He knew her, too. He swept his hat off and held it in front of him, revealing a head of thick dark hair, matched by the well-groomed mustache he wore. Well-groomed was an excellent description of him in general. His suit was neatly pressed, his cravat carefully tied, and it was evident that he had gone to some trouble to make himself as presentable as possible for the occasion of meeting his mail-order bride. The effect was oddly touching, and she found herself smiling as he advanced toward her, one hand outstretched. It did not hurt matters that he was very handsome indeed. "Miss Elizabeth Trent, I presume," he said, smiling as he took her hand and pressed it. "I'd know you anywhere. Your father's letter said that you were dark-haired, dark-eyed, and pretty as a picture." She raised her eyebrows, nearly startled into a laugh. He never did. "All right, perhaps I exaggerate," Nathaniel Carter said, chuckling. "But I could read between the lines. And sure enough, here you are, perfect in every detail." His eyes were warm and appreciative as he looked her over. "You must be exhausted after your journey. I'm so glad that you've arrived at last." "As am I," she said. He had released her hand at last and she bent to pick up her valise, but he swooped in and took it for her. "I'm sorry to say this so soon after meeting you, Mr. Carter, but I must correct you in one important point. The man who wrote the letter accepting your match was not my father, but my stepfather." He nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, of course, I would have realized, if I'd thought about it, especially as his surname is different than yours. Davis, isn't it? Oh, and please, Miss Trent, don't hesitate for a moment to correct me in anything and everything that you feel necessary." He smiled. "Anyone will tell you that I make just as many mistakes as the next fellow, and I hope I'm humble enough to try and learn from them." His humility was appealing, and she found herself smiling back as the last of her nerves eased away. "I don't know that anyone would say such a thing," she said. "In fact, I befriended an acquaintance of yours on the train here, and she had nothing but praise for you. Miss Clara Simmons." She nodded in their direction, and his eyes followed her gesture to the little knot of the Simmons family, still busily talking. A more genuine smile crossed his lips. "Of course, Clara has returned, too. I hope that means her sister is safely through her confinement." "I believe so." Was it a boy or a girl?" His frankness on a rather unusual for a man, at least, especially an unmarried man, subject was disarming. Eliza liked him for it. "A boy." I believe Clara said they named him James, after his paternal grandfather. Good, Nathaniel Carter said, nodding firmly. That means that little Garland will have a brother to play with, and Susie and Meg will have another brother to dress up like a doll. I'm sure Garland must have been getting tired of it by now. In response to the wide-eyed look of curiosity from Eliza, he explained, I haven't seen Maud for some time, but we knew each other when we were children. The Simmons family and my own family are all old friends, and, of course, Sam and Clara keep me up to date on the happenings with Miss Maud and her clan. He laughed. Mostly Clara. Whenever Sam tries to tell me about his older sister and his nieces and nephews, he invariably devolves into eye-rolling and head-shaking. The Simmons had, by now, noticed the fact that both Eliza and Nathaniel Carter were looking in their direction. Almost as one, they waved with a uniform bright cheerfulness. There was something additional underlying Clara's expression, Eliza thought, a certain wistfulness. Perhaps it was simply that she was sorry that her journey with her new friend was over with. Or perhaps, just perhaps, she was sorry to be losing her white knight. Clara is very sweet, Eliza said. Shall we go and say hello to them all? I'd like to meet her family. And so, you shall, but not today. I've already spoken to Sam about it, and we agreed that you'd likely be very tired. Clara always is, he says, after the long journey, and your journey has been even longer. He smiled at her again, reassuringly. But don't worry, Miss Trent, I've no doubt that Clara will turn up tomorrow, and the two of you can catch up on stories of your arrival. Clara's a great one for stories. She certainly is, Eliza agreed. Though she was sorry to see her friend be taken away in the loving arms of her family, she also felt a strange sense of relief, which she could not quite account for. Undoubtedly, Clara needed to spend time with her family, after having been gone for 3 months. Why, then, did she get the feeling that Clara would much rather have been at her side, speaking with Nathaniel Carter? She was trying to formulate this feeling into a carefully phrased question as they left the platform behind, but her thoughts were interrupted when a fellow stepped into Nat Carter's path so suddenly that they both nearly plowed into him. Nathaniel Carter stiffened his spine, but he did not step back, even though he was nose to nose with the other man. The other man, a few inches taller than Mr. Carter, about 10 years older, and nowhere near as handsome, curled his lip in a sneer. Why don't you watch where you're going, Carter? You don't own this street, you know, even if you do own just about everything else. Eliza saw her companion take a deep breath, his fists closing slowly at his sides as though he was exercising a great deal of self-control. I could say the same for you, Mr. Anderson. I was proceeding along quite well until you stepped directly in front of me, which seems intentionally rude. Anderson sneered even harder, so much so that Eliza momentarily wondered whether his lips might fall off from his efforts. That's your side of the story, he said. Ask anyone who was watching, though, and they'll tell you that you simply got in my way. Nathaniel Carter took another deep breath. I have no desire to argue with you, Mr. Anderson, especially in front of my guest. Excuse us, won't you? He offered Eliza his arm. Somewhat distracted by the other man, she took it without thinking. Under her hand, Nathaniel Carter's arm was hard with muscle and tension. He led her past his antagonist, who called after him, hiding behind a woman's skirts, Are you, Carter? Wouldn't expect anything more of a man who was freely given everything he's got, never had to work for a thing. They left him behind and turned the corner. It wasn't until they were out of sight, and out of earshot, that Nathaniel Carter relaxed at last, even giving Eliza an apologetic smile. I'm sorry about that, he said. Trevin Anderson is my nearest neighbor, and I'm afraid that our relationship has always been rather fraught. Rival ranchers, I guess the problem is. Though sometimes I wonder whether he really wants to run me off, or if he enjoys having someone to be angry at. He shook his head. I hope you won't think badly of Rocky Creek on his account, or of me, for that matter. It's really quite a peaceful, friendly place. I can believe it, she said steadily. Goodness knows you'd have encountered far more arguments than that walking down the street in Boston. I quite like the town, what I've seen of it so far, she smiled at him, feeling a blush coming on. And, if it's not too forward, I quite like you. He met her gaze and smiled widely. I think I like you, too, Miss Trent. And if Clara Simmons has befriended you, then I can only expect that you and I will get along just fine. I'm glad to hear that you value her opinion, for I do, too. And perhaps you could call me Eliza, Mr. Carter. Seeing as we're going to be friends. And more than friends, he said, closing a hand over hers briefly where it rested on his arm. Her heart sped up a little, double time. Yes, of course, Eliza, and you must call me Nathaniel. Or Nat, if you prefer. My oldest friends have always called me that. Nat, the name sounded strangely truncated rolling off her tongue, as though it belonged to someone else, not him at all, or, perhaps, as though it did not yet belong her to use it. She smiled, though, and resolved to do her best to try and get used to it. I'm glad to be here. And I'm glad that you're glad. Now, Miss Trent, Eliza, I've arranged a room for you at the boarding house, until such a time as we set our wedding date. Do you mind? It's a lovely place, and Mrs. Adele sets a very good table. No, of course I don't mind. The idea of having some time to herself, without his interesting but rather stimulating presence, was a relief. I'll take you there now, if you like, and you can have a chance to freshen up before supper. I hope you get plenty of rest tonight, especially after your long journey. Then, tomorrow, I'll return to take you to the ranch and show you around the property, give you a chance to get used to it a bit. He smiled. I'm almost certain that Clara will stop by to visit her brother, but really to visit you, Eliza. To visit Eliza, or Samuel, or to visit the owner of the B-Bar K Ranch? Eliza had her suspicions about which of these motivations was the true one. But there was little point in dwelling on it now. If Clara did indeed harbor certain feelings for the wealthy young rancher, her white knight, Eliza couldn't hold it against her. She rather suspected she was beginning to harbor feelings of her own. Chapter 4. The town of Rocky Creek, Colorado, was undoubtedly a working town. When Eliza woke up at just past 6 the next morning, the streets were already abuzz with pedestrians. She sat in the window seat and watched for a while, marveling at how different, and yet how similar, it was from the city she had left behind. Men of all ages rushing to and fro, carrying boxes and belts of tools, driving horses and cattle through the streets. Young housewives escorting their children to the school down the road, alternately chastising and hurrying them along. A few older couples out for a morning stroll, several turned into the inn, to take breakfast in Mrs. Adele's celebrated dining hall. But for the fact that Rocky Creek was operating on a much smaller scale, it could almost have been mistaken for the same atmosphere as she'd grown up with in Boston. The thought of Boston made her heart ache suddenly, with a fierceness she did not expect. Ever since she had met Clara the week before on the train, she had been able to set aside her yearning for the comfort of her mother. Now, alone in her room at the boarding house, she found that the longing for the old familiarity was back, and stronger than ever. Perhaps it was so keen, she thought, because she knew that she would likely never see her mother again, that she would never return to Boston. Now that she had met her future, in the person of Nathaniel Carter, she knew there was no returning. He was undoubtedly a good man, and a good match. A far better man, a far better match, than she had any right to expect, considering that her stepfather was the one who had arranged it. For the first time, she found herself confronted with the conundrum of whether she ought to be grateful for what Thomas Davis had done. She missed her mother something dreadful, it was true, and the journey here had been very difficult. But already she had Clara, and Nathaniel, and she rather liked what she'd seen of this little town. Could she really regret the actions, painful though they were, that had landed her here? It was far too complicated a subject to analyze before breakfast, she decided, and so she dressed and went down to the dining hall. She had just started with the cup of hot, steaming black coffee when Nathaniel Carter came through the door. He spotted her at once, a smile spreading across his handsome face, and took a seat beside her. "Good morning, Eliza. How did you sleep?" "I slept very well, thank you, Nathaniel." Try as she might, she simply could not force the shorter version of his name to emerge from her lips. The last few syllables insisted on joining it, every time she tried. Have you had breakfast? I did, but I wouldn't object to having coffee to keep you company. The maid, Maria, brought him a mug with a welcoming smile. As she ate, Eliza found that conversing over breakfast with a man she scarcely knew was less of a challenge than she would have expected. It was an unlooked-for relief. She had not realized until then how painful and difficult the last several weeks of silent meals had been, especially after she had been raised to enjoy mealtime conversation with her mother and other friends. With Thomas Davis, she had not only had to consider every word before she allowed it to leave her lips, but she had also scarcely ever had a chance to talk at all, as he frowned at discussion during dinner. It was a pleasure to feel free to ask Nathaniel questions and be asked questions in return. "What shall we do today?" she asked as she finished up her bowl of porridge and cream. "You said I might come out to the ranch." "Yes, if that is what you'd like to do," he said, nodding eagerly. He looked as fresh-faced and enthusiastic as a boy half his age, she realized suddenly, with a twinge of fondness for the man seated across from her. "I'd very much like to show you around the ranch. It'll soon be your home, after all." Home, a concept that she could not quite believe. For so long, she had known only the little house where she had grown up. Then, suddenly, the oppressive grandeur of Thomas Davis's household, and now, things had changed again, and she would soon find herself the mistress of a ranch house in Colorado. Goodness, but how strange everything was. She felt the strong urge to reach out and hold on to Nathaniel, as though he were the only solid, real thing about. She folded her hands in her lap to keep from giving in to the feeling. They'd only known each other such a short while, surely it wouldn't be appropriate to reach out to him in such a fashion, let alone touch him without his invitation or permission. To her relief, he didn't seem to notice her sudden need for reassurance. He was still happily talking about the ranch. It was obvious that the B-Bar-K was his pride and joy. His family had owned it for 3 generations now, she found, and before his father passed away, he had instructed his son to keep it in the family if possible. "I reckon most fellows my age would have been married with a family of their own by now," he said, almost apologetically, if not for Rocky Creek itself. "Young women are few and far between here. Besides, running the ranch has taken most of my time and energy. After Pa passed, I had the opportunity to expand by buying out one of the neighbors, and I jumped on it. I've been scraping by ever since, but it'll be worth it soon enough. The ranch is the biggest in the county now, and one of the biggest in Colorado itself." His smile was beamingly proud. She couldn't help but smile back. "I suppose it would be difficult to concentrate on the ranch and on starting a family all at the same time," she said. "Both would need your care and devotion." "That's it exactly," Nathaniel agreed with a nod. "But now that things are starting to smooth over a little, I reckon it's as good a time as any to get married." He gave her a rather shy smile. "It was Pa's idea, years ago, that I write to a matrimonial agency and request a mail-order bride from back east." She did not intend to ask the question, but it burst from her without thinking. "Why is that?" she said. "When you could have married someone from Rocky Creek?" "Why, who do you mean?" He blinked at her in genuine confusion. "Well, there's Clara, of course," she said. "I know she's a bit younger than you are, but, goodness, I'm even younger than that. And it's obvious that you're good friends. She speaks very highly of you." The color in his suntanned cheeks had darkened a little, though she couldn't quite tell why. Was it embarrassment? Or was it irritation? His voice gave her no clues. "Clara," he said, "is a friend, you're right about that. But she's just a friend. I grew up with her brother Henry and her sister Maud, and Sam has been one of the best workers we've ever had on the B-Bar-K. I'm delighted to have him as my foreman, he's my right-hand man. Anthony Simmons is a good man, my father always liked him, and Mrs. Gale, his wife, she was always kind to me when I was a boy. She made cookies every week, always had one set aside for me when I came to see Henry." He gave a reminiscent smile, softening a little. The tension that her question had brought seemed to ease out of him as he spoke about Clara's family. "But for all that, Miss Trent, Eliza, Clara is still just a friend to me. I won't downplay the importance of that. I'm grateful for the friends I've got, and I wouldn't trade the Simmons family for anything." But she's no more and no less, Eliza, believe you me. Eliza took in a deep breath and let it out slowly, nodding. She met his gaze and found nothing but truth within those dark eyes. I didn't mean to suggest anything, she said carefully. I was only curious, that's all. It seemed to cost him an effort, but Nathaniel smiled at her. Well, set your mind at ease, he said. You'll see, when Clara comes to visit at the ranch house, as she does nearly every day. She's like a little sister to me, that's all. They seemed to have reached an understanding, at least, as much of an understanding as they were likely to reach. Though Eliza still held some reservations about the exact nature of Nathaniel Carter's feelings for Clara Simmons, or, more accurately, about Clara's feelings for Nathaniel, she decided that it was the wisest course to simply take him at his word. After all, there was no use borrowing trouble. And thus far, things seemed to be going better than she had hoped. The journey to Bar K Ranch did not take much longer than 15 minutes by cart. Eliza was rather glad about that, though she didn't mind the idea of living in the country. It made her feel considerably more comfortable to know that the little town of Rocky Creek was readily accessible. Perhaps she would be able to drive the cart herself, with a little practice, or perhaps Nathaniel would even teach her to ride a horse. He gave a thoughtful nod in response to her tentative suggestion. I reckon it would be best if you learn how to drive a cart and ride a horse, he said. After all, anything that will make you more comfortable here in your new home, that's what I want. She smiled at him. Clara was right, she said. You are very kind. He raised an eyebrow, almost skeptically, but there was a new note in his smile. She said that about me, eh? She did. Among other things, of course. You've made quite an impact on those who know you, Nathaniel, and it makes me feel quite hopeful about our future together. Good, he said, and now he was grinning. I'm starting to feel pretty hopeful about it myself. Not far out of town, Nathaniel pointed out a little cart path that ran off to the west as belonging to the Simmons family. At the end of the path, he told her, was the little farm where Anthony and Henry Simmons raised crops to sell at the market, and the little house where all the Simmons children had been raised, where Gail Simmons still reigned supreme. So, you see, Clara's not too far off, he said. Not such a surprise that she ventures over to visit her brother now and then. I thought you said she came nearly every day. Did I say that? I don't know, I reckon I don't keep track of her comings and goings. She's pleasant enough company, but she's there for Sam, not for me. Eliza was beginning to get the feeling that Nathaniel Carter was doing his best to reassure her that she had nothing to fear from Clara Simmons. It was another evidence of his kindness, she decided. He was so keen that she not worry about anything, it couldn't help but reach her heart. If he was not worried, then she wouldn't worry, she decided, and that was when she knew that she had already come to trust him. Nathaniel nodded at another turnoff from the main road as they went by. That there's the way to Jody Anderson's, he said. Our nearest neighbor. Anderson. She was able to place the name immediately. That interesting fellow who spoke to you in the street yesterday? Interesting is a good word for Mr. Anderson, Nathaniel agreed with a wry smile. Something tells me you could think of a few others. This made him laugh. I reckon I could, at that. But I won't, not in the company of a lady. He gave her a wink. At last, they turned off to the left, onto a short, broad pathway that was well traveled even though it was not the main road. It was lined with white-trunked birches, and ahead of them the ranch house sprawled, its walls as whitewashed as the bark of the trees. Everything was tidy, neat as a pin, and Eliza found herself wondering vaguely whether Nathaniel really needed a wife to keep things in order. Of course, he wanted to raise a family to hand down the farm in the family name. That was the reason behind his request to the matrimonial agency. And, perhaps, he was a bit lonely. He certainly seemed to enjoy her company, a fact which made her feel rather warm inside. He handed her down from the cart and spread an arm out to indicate the ranch house. Make yourself at home, he said. What's mine is yours. No doubt Clara will be along soon, and she can show you the inside of the house. If you don't mind, I'd better attend to a few chores before noon, and then I'll come in and fix you some luncheon. Oh, I'd be glad to do that, she assured him. I'm certain I can find the kitchen myself. He regarded her for a moment, with something like affection in his gaze. I reckon you could do that easily enough, he said. But you're a guest here. Not a guest for long, she reminded him. This is to be my home soon. For another moment, he looked at her through and through. She wondered what he was searching for, but at last he relaxed and smiled once more. You're right, there, he said. Say, here come Sam and Jake. Hello, fellows. Come and say hi to Eliza. Jake turned out to be Jacob Knowing, a fellow a few years older than Nathaniel, who had worked the ranch when the elder Carter was still alive. He greeted Eliza with a shy smile and a handshake, then made his excuses quickly. Sam Simmons lingered. The smile he gave Eliza was the same as it had been the day before on the platform, quick and warm and friendly, with a note of reassurance, as though he yearned to tell her that everything was going to be all right. Even without him speaking the words, she felt as though it were true. His handshake was just as warm and friendly as his smile. Well, now, I'm glad to meet you, Miss Eliza. My sister Clara's told me all about you. Said you made the journey home go twice as fast as it usually does. I'm glad if I did, she certainly made it more pleasant for me. There was an air of familiarity about Sam Simmons that she could not quite place, though it was easy enough to put it down to his resemblance to his sister both in feature and manner. He laughed easily, smiled more easily still, and every now and then as they spoke, she caught him give a wicked, crooked grin that made her feel almost a little dizzy. There was an appeal to the Simmons personality that seemed to extend to the whole family, and she found herself suddenly grateful that they were so close to the ranch. Why, she might go and visit them at any time, and find out for herself if the attractive personality of Clara and Sam was shared with their parents and older brother. At her mention of the journey, he sobered a little. She told me a little about why you were comin' here, and your poor ma. I hope you don't mind. Clara's not a gossip, exactly, but she does like to talk. He rubbed his chin and laughed. Come to think of it, I reckon she's the textbook example of a gossip. I'd agree with that, put in Nathaniel, smiling. But she means well, and I don't imagine that gossipers usually do. Oh, she's got a sweetheart at the center of her, that's true, my little sister, Sam agreed. And she'll be glad to have a friend like you right up the road, Eliza. I hope you don't mind me callin' you by your first name so quick after we met, but after all of Clara's talk, I feel as though I know you already. She couldn't help but smile at him. That's all right, Sam, I feel as though I know you, too. It was almost startling to realize that the words were utterly true. From the moment she had laid eyes on him the day before, she had felt more settled, her nerves beginning to calm. He was working his magic today, as well, and around her the newness and strangeness of the ranch suddenly seemed familiar and dear. The very comfort of his presence was strange and unexpected, and she was grateful for it. As kind as Nathaniel was, she doubted that she would have felt quite so welcome at the ranch without Sam Simmons' input. She glanced up at her intended husband, only to see that his eyes were fixed on the distance. He smiled. Speaking of Clara, he said, here she comes now. Eliza turned to follow his gaze, awash with a feeling of relief. As comfortable as Sam made her feel, she was grateful for the impending arrival of her friend, who would no doubt be able to show her around the place more readily than Sam, who was after all in the middle of his workday. Yes, there she came, head lifted high, already smiling at the sight of them, even from afar off. Eliza glanced swiftly at Nathaniel. He was smiling, too, smiling his welcome for his old friend. Unexpectedly, a pang of something unfamiliar shot through Eliza's heart. It was mere uncertainty, she told herself, though there was something like jealousy at the edges of it. She found her gaze drawn once more to Sam Simmons. His eyes had never left her face, not even to look for his sister. He gazed at her steadily, with that same warmth and friendliness, and when he saw the doubt in her eyes, he smiled. Once again, her nerves began to calm, and she was left mystified to realize the power that Sam seemed to have over her heart. Strange, to think how quickly a new acquaintance could begin to have an impact on a girl's life. But perhaps it was only to be expected. After all, everything around her was strange and new. And if she found a note of reassurance and familiarity in the presence of Sam Simmons, then so much the better. Chapter 5. The week that followed Eliza's arrival in Rocky Creek was almost placid in its peacefulness, and Eliza was grateful for every moment of it. Oh, she still missed her mother dreadfully, and still found herself longing for Boston, feeling homesick, at least a few times each day. But she was also finding that she could settle into a routine in her new home with far more rapidity than she had expected. It was such an upheaval, to come so far and to leave everything she'd ever known behind, that it was almost laughable to find that she already had close friends and comforts, only 7 days after her arrival. The boarding house was comfortable and homey. Mrs. Adele was a motherly woman, with 3 grown children and 8 grandchildren of her own, who took to Eliza immediately and pressed all sorts of treats on her at mealtimes and in between. Each day, Eliza was sent for, usually by Nathaniel. Once or twice it was Sam Simmons who showed up to collect her in the cart, smile at the ready, joking and laughing with Maria and Mrs. Adele. It was clear to see that he was well liked by everyone who knew him, and well respected, too. "We Simmons are, well, I reckon you'd call us notorious," he confessed to her one morning, after she mentioned his evident familiarity with all and sundry in Rocky Creek. "My great-grandfather was one of the founding fathers of the town. He settled here back in 1810, without meaning to." She laughed at this. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean," he said, grinning, "that it was an accident. He was headin' for California, had no intention of getting caught up in the territories. But his mule was lammed along the way, and then he met this beautiful girl from one of the tribes that lived in this valley, and the rest is history, as they say. Now here's myself and my brother and sisters, born and bred here, and Rocky Creek is as much a part of our blood and bones as anything could be. And that's why you know everyone in town. That's about the size of it. I know everyone, and they all know me. It's a comfortable place to be, full of good folks, for the most part. The only ones you must watch out for are the strangers, folks who come in from faraway places, carry in faraway customs with them." "Oh. Such as who, for example?" "Well, I hear tell there's a pretty young lady who recently arrived from back east somewhere, tends to go out without a bonnet. Downright scandalous, if you ask me." He gave her a broad wink, and she laughed outright. "Nobody wears bonnets in Boston anymore, unless they're little old ladies paying calls in the afternoon." "Well, like I said," he reiterated, grinning. "Faraway places with faraway customs." She liked his teasing, and she liked even more the realization that he thought she was pretty. All in all, she felt that she was settling into her new life very well. The only sore spot was the fact that, after a week in Rocky Creek, Nathaniel had yet to set the date for their wedding. "We haven't even talked about it," she confessed to Clara in response to her friend's questioning on the subject as they took a walk one morning. "And I'm not sure why." She frowned slightly. "Perhaps you should ask him," Clara suggested. "I could." Eliza shook her head. "I'm not sure why I feel so reluctant to do so. He's never been anything but kind and gentle with me. Perhaps it's just that I don't want to press him, he's so busy with the ranch." "That's true, but he did decide it was the right time to marry," Clara pointed out. "And if he doesn't want to marry you soon, then he ought to tell you so. I don't see why he should be beating around the bush." Eliza raised her eyebrows. "I don't know that I would put in quite those terms." "Well, he ought to make up his mind, that's all." Clara folded her arms defensively. "Besides, you're my friend, and I don't want to see you hurt." "I'm not hurt," Eliza assured her gently. "And he's your friend too, isn't he?" "I suppose so. Sometimes I wonder why I believe that we are friends, after all these years. I feel as though he still sees me as a child sometimes, or nothing more than Sam's younger sister, or perhaps not even that. Sometimes I'm not sure that he sees me at all." Clara's emotions seemed to have taken a sudden turn. Impulsively, Eliza reached out and put a hand on her arm. "Of course that isn't true, Clara," she said. "Nathaniel has spoken often of you, and in the fondest, warmest tones. I'm sure that he thinks of you as a dear friend." Clara gave a warning sniffle. Does he? Yes, of course. Are you certain? I'm absolutely sure of it. Another warning sniffle, and suddenly Clara burst into tears, covering her face with both hands. Somehow, that almost makes it worse. Clara. Eliza threw her arms about her friend, holding her close, shocked at the unexpected outpour of emotion. I just wish he would go ahead and marry you, that's all. Clara sobbed. I can't stand to sit by and simply wait. Oh, it's awful to have hope, Eliza, especially when I feel so very awful about it all. Oh, Clara. She hesitated. She had her suspicions as to why Clara should say these things, of course, but ought she to speak them outright? She must. Clara had been as good a friend to her as she had ever had, and she couldn't shy away from subjects that may be uncomfortable, not when it might unburden her friend to speak about them. After all, Clara had done her the great favor of listening to her story, hadn't she, the very day that they had met on the train? Still hesitant, she spoke up, hearing a slight waver in her voice but pushing on despite it. It's because of how you feel about Nathaniel, isn't it? You've had feelings for him for some time. Clara retrieved a handkerchief from her pocket and wiped her eyes. Her abundant auburn hair was escaping from its pins, and her face was nearly as red as the wayward locks. Still sniffling, she nodded, not meeting Eliza's gaze. I have, she confessed. I believe I was infatuated with him from the time I was young. He was so strong and kind and brave, and when my brothers teased me, he always told them to leave me be. She sighed. Your white knight, Eliza said, quietly encouraging. Yes, my white knight. Somewhere along the way it began to be more than that, perhaps it always does. That's what all the stories are about, aren't they? A girl can't have a white knight without falling in love with him. Oh, but Eliza, please don't be angry with me. She grasped Eliza's hands, her eyes searching for her friend's response, wide and blue and still damp despite the handkerchief and her best efforts. I didn't mean to, I still don't mean to. I wouldn't do anything to stand in your way. Nat will marry you, not me, and he'll be so happy with you. How could he not? I only wish that you two would be married sooner rather than later, and perhaps these feelings will go away. I want them to go away. It isn't as though I ever asked for them. Of course not, Eliza soothed her, squeezing her hands comfortingly. I'm just glad that you can be honest with me. I know it must be very painful. She bit her lip, her own bouts of jealousy came to mind unbidden. It was painful for her, too, not just for Clara. I'm so sorry, my friend. Have you never spoken to him about it? No, Clara admitted, wiping her nose now with the handkerchief. I never thought he'd give me two thoughts, and I was right. He's far too good for me. Nonsense, Clara. No, it's true. He never would have considered me as a wife, otherwise, why would he have written to the matrimonial agency? Eliza sighed, shaking her head. I'm afraid I don't have a good answer for that, she said. Apart from the fact that it was his father's idea, and perhaps he thought that it would be easier to let someone else make the decision for him, I don't know, Clara, but it pains me to see how hurtful it is to you. She hesitated. Has he ever given you any reason to believe that he would think of me? No, not a one. She shook her head, regretful but decisive. Then, I'm afraid, I don't know that I can release him from our engagement. Of course not. Clara's eyes were wide, her grip suddenly stronger again, driven by her alarm. You shouldn't even think of such a thing. No, it's just my silly feelings, Eliza. Please don't let them stand in the way of your marriage, of you making him the happiest man on earth. For I know that's what he'll be, Eliza. You're so sweet and good, any man would be lucky to have you. And it just so happens that Nat is the best man I know. So, it'll all work out for the best, you'll see. Her eyes, watery again, were nonetheless echoing her smile. She threw her arms about Eliza and hugged her fiercely. I'd rather see my dear friends happy together than to ever see them apart. Please believe me, Eliza dear, everything will work out for the best. As she returned Clara's embrace, Eliza couldn't help but pray that her friend's words would turn out to be true, for the sake of all of them. Chapter 6. It was a rare occurrence that Eliza stayed past sundown on the ranch, but it was just such an evening when the peaceful world suddenly seemed to suffer an earthquake. Clara was still there, too. The two had lingered long past supper time, first cleaning up the kitchen and then taking a seat in the sitting room with Nathaniel and Sam. The three had already been close friends, and Eliza was deeply conscious of how grateful she was that she had been added seamlessly into the mixture, rather than throwing off the balance with her newness. Having supper together had become something of a habit, but this was the first evening that the clock struck 10 and nobody had yet made a movement toward dispersal. She hid a yawn behind her hand, not wanting the night to end quite yet. Sam would drive her home, she was sure of it, and she looked forward to the journey underneath the stars and their quiet glimmer. It was Sam who, amid the conversation, suddenly broke off mid-sentence and leaned forward in his chair, listening intently. He turned his ear toward the window. Eliza went quiet, watching the movements of his body, but Clara turned to Nathaniel. "What on earth is my brother doing, Nat?" Nathaniel held a finger to his lips. "Something's wrong," Sam said. "I smell smoke." "The cook stove in Jake's quarters," Nathaniel began, but Sam was already on his feet, shaking his head. "It's not that," he said. He flung open the heavy curtains that blocked out the night. At first, Eliza couldn't see a thing. Then, gradually, she made out what looked like a dim golden glow in the distance. "The field is on fire," Sam said, and bolted from the room, with his employer hot on his heels. Clara reached for Eliza's hand, holding it fast in a firm grip. Together, the two young women rushed in the wake of the men. Eliza's heart was pounding, and even more so as they rounded the edge of the house and saw the glow from the flames, still far away, steadily mounting. She heard Nathaniel's voice. "It's headed for the barn. The horses. I'll open the stables," Clara called. Her hand still tightly grasped in that of her friend, Eliza found herself being tugged in Clara's wake as the other girl ran for the barn. As they approached it, Eliza was shocked by the amount of heat that the flames were putting out, even from this far away. Her heart was racing, and she felt strangely dazed. But when Clara turned to her, eyes on hers, she managed to regain control of herself and give her friend a deep nod. "Tell me what to do." Clara pointed down the long line of the stables. "We've got to open the stable doors and herd the horses out. There's a corral just to the left outside, try to direct them that way, and we'll collect them as we can." "But the fire." "The boys will get the flames out, you'll see. Just get the horses, just in case." Her heart in her mouth, Eliza hurried off in the direction Clara had pointed her to, while her friend ran the other way, opening stall doors as she went. The first horse that Eliza came to stepped forward, ears pricked, whickering curiously. Eliza looked up at the long muzzle and gulped. "Please don't run me down," she whispered. The creatures were beautiful, but they were so much larger this close, and she had yet to have learned how to handle them. It took a few trials and errors before she was able to get the stall door successfully unlatched. The horse meandered out from its stall, not seeming to feel much pressure to move quickly. Tentatively, Eliza slapped its rump, trying to hasten it along. But it wasn't until Clara came back in her direction, bareback astride one of the horses and herding the rest with a series of calls and whoops, that the horse took it seriously and went to join its fellows. Eliza breathed a sigh of relief and raced to the next stall. This one went much more smoothly, and soon the second horse was kicking up its heels, running to follow the rest. Clara returned, her face already smudged with dirt and her hair coming loose from its pins. "Come on, Eliza. Let's get the rest. The flames are getting closer." Indeed, it was getting hot in the barn. Eliza fought down a rising swell of panic and ran for the next stall. Between the two of them, they freed the rest of the horses quickly and ran out to try and herd them into the corral. It was easier said than done, especially considering Eliza's continuous nervousness around the large creatures. From the other side of the barn, she heard the hollers and cries of the men, now joined by Jake and the other 3 ranch hands, all fighting to control the flames, which edged ever closer to the barn. She didn't dare step around the structure to see how close they were getting. She could only keep her eyes open and pray. That's the last of them. Clara pushed the corral gate shut, breathing hard. Stay here with them, Eliza, I'm going to see what I can do for Nat. Clara. Please don't. Don't worry, I'll be perfectly safe. She was gone, then, disappearing around the corner, leaving Eliza standing on her own. For a long moment, she hesitated, her breath coming in tremulous gasps. Then, with a groan, she flung herself forward toward the edge of the barn, desperate to see whether the men had made any progress, and terrified of what she might find. Almost immediately, she breathed a sigh of relief. The fire was still burning, but the flames had been beaten away from the barn, diverted toward the meadow once more. As she watched, one of the ranch hands flung another bucket of water on a spurt of flame, and it sizzled and steamed. The far west wall of quarters that Jake and the rest of the ranch hands shared was scorched, but evidently the men had fought it off and prevented it from destroying that structure, too. In the darkness of the night, lit only by the dying flames, she could not distinguish the figures from each other, save, of course, for Clara, who was identifiable by her slight, small form. Eliza huffed out a brief laugh to see her friend wildly fling a bucket of water toward the flames. It fell short, but the effort was no doubt appreciated. She leaned against the back wall of the barn, trying to catch her breath and slow her racing heart. One of the figures, the tallest one, detached itself from the rest and came toward her. Eliza? Are you all right? She straightened up and managed a smile, though she knew he couldn't see it. Yes, of course, Sam, thank you. Is the danger over? I reckon so, for now. He came to a stop beside her, bending a little to peer in her face. The glow of the fire was just enough that she could make out his features, and the worry on his face. For now? He nodded, and his shoulders heaved in a sigh. For the first time, she realized how exhausted he must be. He seemed so strong and stoic, his sense of humor ever intact, that it was almost startling to think that he was prone to the same limitations as any other man. Instinctively, she reached out and caught hold of his arm. He turned to her at once, and she saw the exhaustion in his face give way to his familiar ready smile. What do you mean? She asked him, voice low. Is Nathaniel in danger? Oh, I reckon Nat's not in any real danger, not to himself, personally. His property, on the other hand, he shook his head. Something tells me that someone's out to get him. I don't know if he saw it, but I reckon the signs were there. That fire didn't start by accident. Someone lit it on purpose, and they wanted it to burn down the barn. Maybe even the house. She gasped. Why would anyone do such a thing? I don't rightly know the reason, Eliza, all I know is that folks get wild sometimes, and on no account. If someone took it into their head that Nat was their enemy. But surely no one would think such a thing of Nathaniel. Why, everyone seems to like him. As they ought, Sam said gently. I don't mean to worry you, Eliza, I'm just thinking out loud, that's all. I reckon the truth will come out, one way or another. In the meantime, we'd all just better keep our wits about us, keep an eye out. You're here at the ranch every day. Will you help us, as you helped us tonight? His quiet beseeching went straight to her heart. Of course I will, she whispered. I'll do anything I can for you, for Nathaniel, for the ranch. He nodded, that crooked smile appearing briefly before whisking away as if by magic. Appreciate it, he said. We'll all be glad to have someone like you on our side, Eliza Trent. You're very brave. His voice was warm in its approval. And there was another note in it, something like fondness, even affection, that jolted through her like lightning. Suddenly, she realized that she was still holding onto him tightly, that she had been holding onto him for some time now. She released him abruptly, her face burning scarlet. It's you that is brave, Sam, she said. Racing out here to fight a fire, not knowing what you might find, or what might happen. There's the difficulty of it, he said, nodding. He turned to face the dying flames, and the dark figures that fought it still. Amid them was his sister, her slim form readily identifiable with her skirts billowing around her as she ran to and fro. Nearby, another form watched her. "I reckon," Sam said slowly, "that if this were any other night, if I'd already taken you and Clara home, and Nat had already gone to bed, well, I reckon that we wouldn't have known about the fire at all. Leastways, not until it was too late." She longed to ask him what he meant by this. But looking at the grim, quiet determination in his handsome face, she feared that she knew only too well. Chapter 7. Eliza Trent wasn't at all certain that she was ready to live in a world where some mysterious enemy might harbor a desire to burn the house down around her ears, even if she was not the main target of his ire. Of course, she told herself sternly, it wasn't as though she had much choice. She was here, and she had nowhere else to go. Besides that, she had grown quite attached to the new friends she had made in Rocky Creek. Nathaniel and Clara, Jake knowing, and the other ranch hands, and of course Sam Simmons. She could not envision herself turning her back on them, no matter how frightened the possibilities of danger made her. She caught herself wishing that she could speak to her mother about it, crying her problems out into her shoulder as she had done so often when she was still young. But she was 18 now, a grown woman, she reminded herself with a metaphorical squaring of her shoulders. Soon, she would be married. She did not need a mother to cry to. She no longer had one, anyhow, so what was the point in thinking about it? It was approaching 1:30 in the morning when she finally made her way up the steps of the boarding house veranda. A candle had been left in the window, and Mrs. Adele opened the door almost immediately after she knocked. "Goodness, Eliza. I've been worried sick about you." She offered her landlady a tired smile. "I'm sorry, there was a fire at the ranch, and we had to put it out. It took some time." Mrs. Adele clucked like a mother hen and shepherded her toward the stairs. "I see that Sam and Clara are out there in the wagon. I'm glad you were all together, at least. Is everything all right? No one hurt?" In response to Eliza's exhausted shake of the head, she nodded to herself and gave her a little push toward her room. "Well, then. You'll just tell me all about it in the morning. Get some sleep, dear, and I'll hear the story over your coffee." Too tired to protest, too tired to even wash up, Eliza stumbled up the stairs and fell into her bed. She slept solid through until 9 o'clock the next morning, waking to the bright sunshine. For a moment she lay still, confusion wrapping tendrils around her mind as she tried to remember what was real and what was imaginary. Had she dreamed about the fire? Had she really been there? Had it really happened? "Oh," she said aloud, wrinkling her nose. "My hair smells like smoke." A bath and a fresh change of clothes helped a great deal, and the cup of coffee that Mrs. Adele replenished continually completed the cure. After telling the whole story to the sympathetic boarding house owner, she felt as though she was ready to face whatever came next. But though she watched out the window for Nathaniel, he did not appear. Neither, to her disappointment, did Sam. Perhaps, she told herself, they had slept in. As she did, they must have been even more exhausted than she was. Perhaps they were already busy at work, trying to ascertain the damage that had been done. Perhaps she had simply slipped their minds. It was already a good hour past the time that they would usually have come for her. She deliberated for a few moments before she laced up her boots, took up her parasol, and set out for the ranch. After all, it was only 20 minutes by cart. It couldn't be that much longer on foot. As she walked past the turnoff to the Anderson place, a gray mare emerged from the pathway, turning onto the main road in the direction of town. She glanced up to recognize the man who had accosted Nathaniel that first day after her arrival, Jody Anderson. He gave her a sardonic smile and a tip of his hat, but did not offer any conversation, let alone ask whether she needed a ride somewhere. It was just as well that he didn't, she told herself. She had had few enough dealings with him, but she instinctively disliked him as it was. The ranch house was silent and empty. She paced through it for a moment, calling for Nathaniel, and then went to the window in the kitchen, scrutinizing the yard. At the corner of her line of sight, she saw a figure disappear in the direction of the barn. Of course, they must all be working on the site of the fire, she realized. Perhaps there were even a few hot spots left to put out this morning. It really was silly of her to expect that he would come for her after all that. Leaving the kitchen door open to the sunshine, she set out for the barn. She had just turned around the front corner, headed toward the back, when she heard Clara's voice. "And what you expect the sheriff to do about it, when you won't even name any suspects? I'm sure I don't know." She stopped cold. She'd never heard Clara's voice like that before, except, she realized, for once. The occasion when Clara had eventually confessed her feelings for Nathaniel had been preceded by anger such as this. "I can't name any suspects when I don't suspect anyone," came the voice of the ranch owner. The stiffness in his tone took Eliza by surprise. She had never heard Nathaniel speak in anything other than a gentle, kind voice, and it was clear that he was annoyed, even angry. Was it solely in response to Clara's own emotion? How long had they been speaking together? She couldn't hear anyone else. They must have been alone. Where were Sam and the other ranch hands? "Well, you ought to, in my opinion," Clara shot back. "With all due respect, Miss Simmons, no one asked your opinion." Eliza's mouth fell open. This was a level of rudeness that she never would have expected from a man like Nathaniel Carter. But it did not seem to dissuade Clara, who carried on spiritedly. "It hardly needs to be asked for, at this point, does it? It isn't just about your ranch, Mr. Carter. It's about my brother, too, his livelihood, and his well-being. And that of your other ranch hands, to boot. Do you think that I don't care about them? I don't need to be reminded that this impacts others, Clara. It's always at the forefront of my mind. But not at the forefront of your actions. This isn't the first time that your ranch has been threatened. You can't simply keep pretending that everything is fine, that it's all an accident. I don't know for certain that it isn't an accident. No one can prove." "Good Lord, you are smarter than that, Nathaniel Carter. No one has to prove what's so obvious. There's no value in being hasty. But there's value in the land. I don't need you to tell me about my land." They were shouting over each other now, and suddenly went silent. She crept forward just enough to crane her neck and see around the corner. There were the two of them. Clara was, she realized suddenly, only a few inches shorter than Nathaniel. They stood practically nose to nose, both with their shoulders and their heads back, glaring at each other. Clara scoffed at his words and turned to go. Quicker than thought, Nathaniel's hand shot out, grasping her arm, and pulled her around to face him. They were closer than ever now, close enough to embrace, with a scant inch between them. Eliza caught her breath and turned her head, covering her mouth, eyes wide. She oughtn't to see this, it wasn't her place, nor her right. "But he is meant to marry me," her mind whispered. But she loved him first, her heart whispered back. Her heart was pounding, and she struggled to catch her breath. Foolish tears came to her eyes, and she blinked them back. She ought to simply walk away, she knew, and let the chips fall where they may, but her gaze was drawn back to where they had stood, face to face, heart to heart, and she saw Clara's strong, slim figure, walking rapidly away, leaving Nathaniel behind. He dragged his hands over his face. She distinctly heard him mutter, "Damn." Eliza pressed her back against the barn, gulping in deep breaths of air. She felt dizzy, as though she had been turned upside down, but she knew that if she did not speak to him about this now, she would never regain the courage that was fueling her in the moment. Taking one last deep breath, she plunged around the corner and called his name. One look at his guilty face told her all she needed to know. She clasped her hands together in front of her and came toward him, doing her best to tell him that she did not blame him, that she was not angry, with her eyes and her tone of voice. "Nathaniel, please don't run away." He managed a smile, weak though it was. "I didn't intend to." His voice was back to that gentle softness which she had come to associate with him, so strangely at odds with the impassioned edge with which he spoke to Clara that it almost seemed to come from a different person. "I didn't know you were back on the ranch. I'm sorry I didn't come to collect you." She shook her head. Close up to him now, she saw that his face was still smudged with soot, his normally neat hair and clothing mussed from the long night. Sympathy tinged her words. "You must be exhausted." "I slept late myself, and the walk did me good." He nodded, rubbing a hand over his face once more. He was still trying to compose himself, she knew, and if she let him, she might never get to the heart of the matter. "Nathaniel, are you in love with Clara?" He turned wide, startled eyes on her, gaping momentarily, speechless. "What?" "I heard some of what happened just now." She pressed on, knowing that if she allowed herself to stop, the moment would slip through her fingers. Not all of it. But it was enough to make me believe that perhaps you have some feelings for Clara that you haven't admitted, perhaps not even to yourself." Another moment, another few breaths, and then he seemed to draw himself up, as if steeling himself for what was to come. "I reckon it would be foolish and false to try and deny that I feel affection for Clara. She's been a good friend to me, for a long time, too, and sometimes I almost," he broke off, shaking his head. "But love, I don't know about that, Eliza. Seems to me that love isn't the important thing." She stared at him, eyes wide. "Nathaniel. Of course it is. Love is the most important." "Not out here, it's not," he said. "Out here, I've got a ranch to run, and what I need is a strong, steady, kind woman to take care of my home, and someday my family. Clara she's a force of nature, is what she is. She drives me crazy." He huffed out a breath, shaking his head once more. "Besides, don't you know firsthand that love can't be the only important thing? Your mother loved your stepfather, didn't she?" Eliza opened her mouth, and then closed it again, the words left unspoken. Yes, it was true, and she did not have to ask how he knew. Clara must have told him, of course. And he understood without needing a full explanation. He was a good man. And he was right. "It wouldn't be like that with Clara," she said at last. "I don't know how it would be with Clara," he told her. He ran a hand through his hair. "And I don't intend to find out. It's you I'm promised to, Eliza. I won't go back on my word. I'll be a good husband to you, and I'll make sure you won't regret it." "But will you regret it, Nathaniel?" She could not bring herself to ask. He held out a hand to her, and she gazed it for a moment, conflicted feelings swirling around her. Her desire for her friend to be happy, her jealousy over Nathaniel's affections, the fear over what might happen to the ranch, and even the comfort and familiarity, the strange attraction, that she felt with Sam Simmons. It required a deliberate choice to set those feelings aside and take his hand. She had made such a choice before, standing in front of her stepfather's desk. She reached out for him, and let his fingers close around hers. Chapter 8. The end of the summer was near, and the little town of Rocky Creek gathered for a dance to celebrate the oncoming harvest. "Everyone who is anyone will be there," Clara assured Eliza, and laughed. "Of course, everyone thinks they're someone. And perhaps they're right. In a town this size, it isn't as though there's much competition." In the week since the fire, Clara had kept herself away from the ranch for the most part. When she did come to visit, it was only to see Eliza, and the two often went for a wander rather than staying put in the ranch house. Clara was clearly putting herself out to be good to Eliza, and Eliza couldn't help but wonder whether some small part of her felt guilty, even though she had openly admitted her feelings for Nathaniel Carter and sworn that she did not want to interfere with Eliza's engagement. How strange, that the two of them both said what was in essence the same thing. That they cared for each other, Eliza had no doubt. Whether it was love, and whether that love was the most important thing, she was not sure. Time would tell, but suppose she and Nathaniel married without the situation ever being put to rest? The thought tormented her. Though Clara's habits had changed somewhat, the young woman was still her normal cheerful self, which Eliza was glad for. If her friend had been downcast and melancholic, mourning over her broken heart, she would not have been able to stand it. Sam Simmons, for his part, proved to be the rock of reliability that she had suspected him to be. Though he was clearly worried over the fire and the possible implications of someone setting it on purpose, he kept his steady cheerfulness and was, as always, ready with a joke and that crooked smile. He really was very handsome, she thought, watching him work alongside the other ranch hands one morning. And he stood head and shoulders above the rest. Why, he must be 6.5 feet tall. She caught herself wondering whether he would attend the dance and chided herself sternly. What did it matter? She had a dancing partner already, didn't she? And dance with her partner she did. As she spun and twirled and laughed with Nathaniel and the other couples, clapping her hands in time to the beat of the little three-piece band, her heart felt truly light for the first time since she had left Boston behind. It wasn't until there was a brief lull in the music that the thought flashed through her mind, the thought of how much her mother would have enjoyed this. She pushed it away ruthlessly. If she allowed herself to dwell on it, she would only end up feeling melancholy. Instead, she put her mind forcefully on other things. Her wedding must be soon, she was sure of it. Perhaps Nathaniel would even announce the date tonight, in front of the whole town. It gave her a little chill of excitement to think of it, followed by a flood of warmth. In passing, she took his hand and held it tightly, and he gave her a smile. "All right, my dear?" "Perfectly," she called, and spun on through the steps of the dance. 5 dances in, and she was feeling the strain of the unusual exertion. When Nathaniel led her from the dance floor, arm through hers, she did not object. He seated her beside the punch table and handed her a glass, which she sipped gratefully. For a moment he stood over her, smiling down at her wordlessly. She smiled back up at him. "Nathaniel." She hesitated, then smiled once more. "I'm glad that I'm here with you." He pressed her shoulder with his hand, warm and comforting. "It's been a long journey," he said. "And we're not quite there yet." The unspoken, unsettled date for their wedding loomed large in their mind. He squeezed her shoulder once more, briefly. "Everything will work out for the best," he said. "Would you excuse me for a moment, Eliza? I'd better go and pay my respects to the Simmons." She nodded and watched him make his way through the crowd. His words had been meant encouragingly, she knew, and yet, the echo of Clara's favorite phrase struck her oddly, coming from him. She shook off the feeling. No doubt he'd heard Clara say it time and time again, and it was no less true, regardless of who spoke the words. She set herself to simply enjoying the music, glad to feel glad that she was there in Rocky Creek. Through the crowd, she caught a glimpse of Sam Simmons, who was looking in her direction. As their eyes met, he gave her a smile, and she smiled back easily. It was such a natural thing to do. With Sam, she couldn't see his face or form without feeling a warm comfort wash over her. He had, indeed, come to the dance, and he did, indeed, stand head and shoulders above the rest, but he was not dancing. He was on the sidelines, like her, simply enjoying the music. She took a final sip of her punch, and over the rim of her glass, her eyes caught sight of the couple that had just entered the dance floor. Nathaniel Carter and Clara Simmons stood a foot or two apart, gazing at each other. The music swelled, and he held out a hand to her. Eliza held her breath as she saw her friend hesitate, but then, she reached out and took hold of it, their fingers lacing together. Even from this distance, Eliza could see that Clara was trembling slightly. And so, she realized with a cold shock in the pit of her stomach, was Nathaniel. The crowd closed in around them, obscuring them from view. Eliza got to her feet, all the warmth and comfort she had felt dissipating into nothingness. She knew with cold certainty what she had only suspected before. Nathaniel and Clara were in love, no matter how hard they tried to deny it. She felt as though she must do something, as though she must shout it from the rooftops, to be heard above the crowd. But she could not. She leapt to her feet, wavering uncertainly for a moment, and then plunged through the crowd toward the door. Once outside in the warm, hay-smelling air of the late afternoon, she fought to catch her breath. "Eliza?" Though she had not seen anyone follow her outside, the sound of Sam's questioning voice was somehow unsurprising. She turned to him, feeling an unexpectedly intense surge of gratitude for his presence. "Is everything all right?" "No," she shook her head. "It's Nathaniel and Clara. Oh, I'm sorry to be saying this to you, Sam. Please know that I love your sister as a dear friend, and I would never want to do anything to hurt her. I don't blame her for it, or begrudge her, but..." "Clara's in love with Nat," he said. She gaped up at him. You knew? He shrugged. She was infatuated with him back when we were in school, he said. Used to call him her white knight. Yes. I heard her speak of him so, but I thought it was simply that she looked on him as, well, as her savior from teasing, not. Sam smiled wryly. I may not know a lot about women, he said, but I'm pretty sure that no girl who calls a man her white knight would turn him down if he asked her to marry him. Even if he meant right then and there. Even if she was busy. Eliza heaved a sigh. I suppose I'm naive, she said. No, you're trusting, and that's a good thing, Eliza. I shouldn't be, she said rather bitterly. Not after everything that's happened in the last few months. It's good to try and trust others, he said gently. You're sweet and kind, and even after everything you've been through, you look for the good in others. That's what makes you a good person, Eliza. That's why Clara is so determined not to get in your way with Nat. She loves you as much as she loves him, and she'd never do anything to hurt you. Believe me, I know my sister. She's a firebrand, it's true, but she's loyal to a fault. He half laughed. Some might call it stubborn to a fault. It isn't just Clara, though, is it? Nathaniel feels the same way about her. He went still. Are you sure? I heard them talking last week, after the fire. The way they spoke to each other, and then to see them dancing today. She bit her lip. Yes, I'm sure. Sam leaned back against the wall of the town hall, folding his arms. He stood in thoughtful silence for a moment. Do you reckon you could talk to them about it? I've spoken to each of them individually. They're both insistent that they cannot court each other, let alone marry, and that my wedding to Nathaniel must proceed. She put a hand to her forehead, which was beginning to ache. I feel utterly exhausted with it all, Sam. I bet you do. He ran a hand over her hair, lightly, soothing her. Poor Eliza. It's awful complex. I don't like it myself. I only want what's best for everyone. But suppose I break off our engagement, Sam, and Nathaniel and Clara still do not marry, as they said they would not? Suppose I destroy everything in trying to do what is right? The decision is yours, he said softly. No one can tell you whether it's right or wrong. Only your heart knows that. But if I speak up, it may ruin everything. It may, he acknowledged. Things'll be different, that's for sure and certain. My friendship with Clara, my engagement with Nathaniel, I could lose it all. His hand closed over hers, holding it tightly, and he smiled at her, that familiar crooked smile. You won't lose me, he promised. No matter what you do, you won't lose me. I care about you a great deal, Eliza. She looked up at him, catching her breath. He was not just the tallest man there, with the broadest shoulders, he was the kindest, the gentlest, the funniest, the warmest, and the handsomest. And there was a light in his eyes that looked a lot like love. Love was the most important thing, wasn't it? Her heart was pounding, her head dizzied. Just as she was certain that he was going to lean down over her, he stepped back, shaking his head. I reckon I'd better leave you be, he said. That's a surefire way to ruin my friendship with Nat, right there. What is? Kissin' his girl. He grinned widely, though his cheeks darkened, betraying the truth of his emotions. I reckon I love you, Eliza Trent, but you're not free to be loved by me, and if it's all the same to you, I'd rather keep Nat's goodwill, and my job, too, if it comes to that. He gave her an ironic salute. Everything's going to turn out all right, Eliza. Trust me on that. He waved once more and escaped, moving rather more quickly than she would have expected from such a laid-back man, heading for the safety of the town hall. But he was running away, wasn't he? Running from his feelings for her, leaving her breathless, to contemplate the casual frankness with which he had confessed his feelings, the honesty with which he had assessed the dangers of their connection. He was right to be concerned, she knew. How could his friendship with Nathaniel survive his love for Eliza? Her heart sank at the thought. And how could she survive it, otherwise? Lost in her reverie, tossed here and there by her confused feelings, Eliza Trent stood outside as the sky darkened, the day drawing at last to a close. The festivities of the summer dance went on behind her, and she listened to the music with a strange feeling of being utterly apart from everything and everyone, as though she was on the outside looking in, as though she was back on the train, rocking silently through the town of Rocky Creek while the good folks there went about their lives without her. Is this how it would be, she wondered, if she simply got on the train once more and left her new home behind? But she couldn't. She had come too far, she had nowhere left to go, and she loved the people here, the friends she had made. She loved Clara, and Nathaniel, and she loved Sam Simmons most of all. Would her love survive whatever came next? It was the sound of shouting that drew her out of her daydream at last. Shouting from within the hall, but it was coming nearer with every passing second. Suddenly, the double doors at the front of the hall were flung open, and several men pushed through. One wore a sheriff's badge, shining in the last rays of the sun. The second was Jody Anderson, snarling and shouting at the top of his voice. Close behind them came an older man that she recognized as Anthony Simmons, with his two sons beside him. And lastly came Nathaniel Carter, hands in his pockets and a face like thunder. If you're not absolutely sure of it, Sheriff Hayes, I'd rather. Oh, I'm pretty darn sure, Nat. The sheriff pushed his hat back on his head and glared at Anderson, who had fetched up against the wall and was trying his best to stare them all down at once. I had my suspicions as it was, but it was when I caught his ranch hand stuffing kindling under your barn half an hour ago that I knew it for sure. That's ridiculous. A lie. Anderson bellowed. My ranch hands wouldn't ever, and if they did, it wouldn't be because of me. There's got to be a reason for it, Nathaniel said, rubbing the back of his neck. It can't just be spite, can it? How about the fact that he tried to buy out the extra land you purchased last year? Sam put in. He stood at the back of the little knot of men, his arms folded, his mouth tight. Eliza felt her heart flutter when she looked at him. She'd never seen him appear so serious. He was furious about that, right enough. That's ridiculous. Anderson yelled again. He's been trying to run you out of business ever since you took over from your pa, Sam told Nathaniel. It's been clear to me, even though you wanted to deny it. There's no point in trying to be good neighbors with someone who's out to burn down your house around your ears, is there? I never. Anderson howled. A light came into his eye, and he pointed at Sam with a trembling finger. It was you, wasn't it, Simmons? You're the one who set the fire. Sam took a step back. What on earth? It all makes sense now. You've been chafing at the bit for long enough, just as a simple foreman. You think you can run B-Bar K better than its rightful owner, don't you? It was you who set the fire, Samuel Simmons, and it was you who hoped to reap the benefit by running Carter out of here and buying up the land cheap. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Sam shot back, but Eliza could see that he had gone white underneath his suntan. He turned to Nathaniel. He's lying, Nat. Not a word of it is true. Nathaniel glanced at him swiftly, shrugging one shoulder. Of course he's lying, he said. You would never do a thing like that to me, or to anyone. You're far too good a man for such a thing, Sam, and everyone knows it. What Mr. Anderson hopes to achieve by such an accusation, I can only imagine, and I reckon that's enough proof for me. He nodded to the sheriff. If he's that desperate to avoid accountability, trying to pin the fire on one of the best men in the county, then he must be guilty. The sheriff nodded back, reaching out to take Anderson by the arms, holding his wrists behind him. Anderson did not go quietly, howling his head off the whole way. By this point, the entire crowd at the dance had gathered to watch the entertainment, and at such a successful conclusion, they erupted into applause and cheers. The band struck up again, playing a sprightly reel. The sound washed over Eliza, who found that she could hardly hear it over the roaring in her ears. She watched Sam and Nathaniel. The two stood close together, speaking words that no one else could hear. After a long moment, she saw them smile, and Nathaniel reached up to clap his foreman on the shoulder. Together, they went back into the town hall, as close as brothers. As close as brothers. The realization struck her, tumbling through her confused emotions and smoothing them out like stones on a beach. She took a deep breath. Nathaniel had not even hesitated to believe Sam's word. He trusted his friend to the ends of the earth. And Sam had trusted that Nathaniel would believe him, too. They trusted each other. In the mix of it all was Clara, a friend to Nathaniel over and above her love for him. And not to be ignored was the fact that her brother Sam was Nathaniel's close friend. They were all connected by love and trust. And if that was the case, if their love for each other could carry them through such a dangerous time, then perhaps it was her turn to learn to rebuild trust, her long-lost trust and love. Chapter 9. It was tempting to allow more time to pass, but she knew that she would lose her nerve if she did not act as quickly as she could. She went to Clara first. The band was packing up, the people of Rocky Creek trailing out in small groups and couples, heading home, laughing and talking about the events of the day. She caught Clara as she started to walk out with her parents, took her by the arm, and smiled at her. "Did you enjoy yourself?" Clara gave her a glad smile and a swift hug. "I did," she said. "It was a wonderful evening. Thank you for relinquishing your dancing partner for a few of the waltzes, Eliza. That was most kind of you. And him, of course. I reckon he hated every moment that he was away from your side." The famous Simmons' honesty, Eliza was growing to appreciate it more and more. It would make her task much easier, she was certain. "Oh, I don't think he minded much," she said lightly. "Will you come and see me tomorrow, Clara? Bright and early, if you're able." "Surely, I will, if you like." "What are we going to do?" Clara's bright smile shone with eagerness, and Eliza couldn't help but respond in kind. "I think we ought to take a nice little walk and enjoy the last few days of summer," she said. "After all, there's all sorts of excitement to look forward to this autumn." And if Clara believed that she was referring to her own wedding, then so much the better, she decided. Nathaniel made it even easier for her to arrange things. He and Sam drove her back to the boarding house together that evening, and it was as they were saying their goodnights that she mustered up the courage to say, "Nathaniel, might we have a few moments to speak tomorrow morning, bright and early? Perhaps we could take a walk together." He blinked at her, surprised by this suggestion, but smiled and nodded. "Of course, Eliza. And perhaps," she said, "we could discuss our engagement." The look in his eye, she was almost certain, was apprehension. But he smiled again. "Yes," he said. "We ought to discuss that, oughtn't we?" And if he thought that she meant to set a date for their wedding, she told herself, then so much the better. The only way this plan would succeed, she was certain, was if she used the element of surprise. As she took her place the next morning outside the ranch house, she was prey to nerves, as she had been over a month ago on the day of her arrival at Rocky Creek. The day she had met Nathaniel, and the day, she thought with a smile, that she had first laid eyes on Sam Simmons. How long ago that seemed. How complicated things had become since then. But now, for the first time in a long time, her heart was settled and sure. The timing worked out perfectly. Nathaniel emerged from the barn just as Clara crested the hill on the way to her. Neither of them saw each other until it was too late. Eliza saw the moment that their eyes met, and she felt a familiar strange thrill run through her. How strange it was, to recognize love before the parties concerned recognized it themselves. And if it hadn't been for the way Sam had looked at her the day before, she knew, she might not have recognized it at all. Between them, she stepped down from the veranda and reached out a hand to each, smiling bravely. "Well," she said, "here we are, good friends, the three of us. And as we are such good friends, I hope that you two will believe me when I say that I wouldn't give up our friendship for anything. Both of you are very dear and precious to me. It's because of that I must tell you, Nathaniel." She turned to him and took a deep breath. "I must tell you that I release you from our engagement. We will still be friends, I hope. I care for you deeply, and I will never stop. You would have made me an excellent husband, and I would have been very happy but for the fact that I would have known that you were not." She smiled up at him, though she had to blink back tears as she did so. I love you too much to see you unhappy, Nathaniel Carter. She turned on her heel, leaving him blinking and baffled, and gave her attention to Clara. And you, my dear friend. You are honest and cheerful and strong and kind, and you never give anything less than your whole heart to anyone. I love you for that. You were kind to me when I needed it most, and I will never forget it. I cannot be married to the man you love. That's too much to be asked of our friendship, though I know you would willingly give your blessing to it, because that's the sort of person you are. She shook her head, almost laughing. Stubborn to a fault, your brother says, but we all know that he means loyal. That's who you are, Clara. You're the most loyal friend a girl could ask for, and I'm grateful to have you in my life. She stepped back, looking from one to the other, and took one more deep breath for the last great hurdle. And now, she said, now that I have made myself clear, you are free to do with this as you wish. They both turned bemused glances on her, identical expressions of confusion on their faces. She fought off a laugh once more, fearful that they think that she did not mean this seriously. For she did. She meant it as seriously as she had ever meant anything. If you choose to marry, she said, I give you my blessing. I think you ought, if you want my frank opinion. It won't be easy, I'm sure, but love is the most important thing. She nodded, reassuring herself. Sometimes it is misused, and confusing, even baffling, but it will always be the most important thing. And for the two of you, my dear friends, the choice is yours. She squared her shoulders. Everything, she said, will work out for the best. She left them there, still standing and staring at each other. Without quite intending to, she found herself heading for the barn. Behind it, she knew, was the scorched earth left behind by the fire. It was an ugly scar, but its very existence was a testament to the fact that this ranch was beloved enough that it had been protected. And eventually, given enough time and care, the scar would heal. Even now, the pangs of jealousy she had been struggling with for the past few weeks were fading into the distance of her mind. As she walked past the barn, a tall, broad-shouldered form fell into step alongside her. Well, said Sam. Well, Eliza echoed. She stopped, her heart pounding. Should I look back? She asked him softly. Sam darted a glance over his shoulder and gave her that familiar crooked grin. I reckon, he said, you should just keep looking forward. She breathed a sigh of relief. Clara and Nathaniel had been put to the test, and in the moment, evidently, love had won out. Her speech had done the trick, or more likely, simply leaving them alone with the knowledge that they were free to be together. She could imagine what Sam had seen, when he looked so swiftly toward the house. She blushed and laughed all at the same time. Well, she said, if they're happy, I'm happy. Sam Simmons looked at her with love. And if you're happy, he said, I'm gladder than I've ever been in my life. He took her hand, and together, they kept walking. Chapter 10. On the morning of Eliza's marriage, on the very verge of their vows, there came a pounding on the closed doors of the Rocky Creek Chapel. She'd heard the train whistle, but she hadn't given it much thought apart from a fleeting reminiscence of how much had changed over the course of the summer. Why, just 2 months ago she was brand new in town, without knowing a soul apart from Clara Simmons, still vividly homesick for the life she had left behind. And now, here she was, about to become Mrs. Samuel Simmons. Clara would be her sister at last. Clara Simmons no more, her wedding to Nathaniel Carter had taken place just the week before. Standing at the foot of the aisle, looking down the long narrow path in front of her, Eliza took a last deep breath before setting out on the last step of this journey, and the first step of the next. It was then that the pounding began. The assembled crowd erupted in questioning murmurs. Eliza glanced over her shoulder in confusion. Henry Simmons, who had been serving as the usher, looked absolutely baffled. Everyone in Rocky Creek was there already. Who could be knocking on the door? Eliza nodded at him, and he shrugged and pushed open the door. Into the chapel spilled Eliza's mother. In her haste, Hannah Trent Davis nearly bowled Henry over. He caught hold of her before she fell into the aisle, and she let him balance her as her eyes swept the assembled throng. Eliza was already running for her when her mother finally caught sight of her. "Oh, Eliza. Oh, tell me I'm not too late." Eliza flung her arms about her mother, gathering her in close. She held on to her tightly, her chest feeling so full of love that she might burst. She squeezed her eyes shut, hardly able to believe the truth of who was right there in front of her. "Mother." "Oh, Eliza." "Mother, what on earth, where did you, when?" "I've only just now got off the train from Boston," her mother said rapidly. I'm so sorry, Eliza. I should never have let him do this to you." She caught her breath. "Thomas is, well, I suppose I've finally seen him for what he truly is, what he always has been. He threatened to put me away, Eliza, because," her lips trembled. "Well, I told him I didn't want any more children, that I already had a daughter who meant more to me than life, and she was all I wanted. I left him, then, Eliza, and came to look for you. But the porter said it was your wedding day, and I feared that I was too late. Thomas made this match for you, and he had no right to do so. It's your choice, my dear girl, your choice alone." All the hurt and pain of the past, all the worry for her mother's sake, all the distress she had been in during the entirety of this confusing summer, all of it welled up at once, tempered by the knowledge of how things had turned out. Eliza couldn't help but laugh. "Don't fret, mother," she said kindly. "Trust me, I've chosen this of my own accord. I'll explain it to you soon, but, for now, won't you go and sit next to Clara, just up there at the front? I'm about to marry the man I love, you see." With her mother's arm tucked firmly in hers, she led her up the aisle and deposited her next to Clara, who gave her a welcoming smile. Hannah Davis blinked up at her daughter in understandable confusion. "But how?" she asked. "Eliza, are you certain? What's going to happen?" Eliza turned to look at Sam, who waited for her with his usual crooked smile on that face she loved so well. "Never fear, mother," she said, smiling back. "Everything's going to turn out for the best." The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Susannah Calloway. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Susannah Calloway, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Susannah Calloway Western romance.